Cergol. Yay!
So I actually didn't purposely didn't want to or didn't prepare a talk because I don't know. It seems like that in the past when I've given talks, I just end up talking the whole time, and there's not that much time left for questions. And so I thought maybe it'd be nice to do this more like a meeting like we used to have in Raleigh. Although in Raleigh I didn't have everybody facing me; you're generally in a circle. But I have a couple pieces of correspondence that I might read depending on if how the conversation develops. But the theme of the meeting, the heart of the matter, made me think about, well, what would I say about that? What is the heart of the matter? And I kept coming back to, I think the heart of the matter is what is the focus of your attention? Even starting from infancy, what is the focus of the attention? I said your attention, and maybe it's your attention, but there's an attention, and it seems to be inextricably wrapped up with your need for self-definition. We start our life. And at some early age, we're keenly aware of ourselves as an individuality, but we don't know who we are in the world, and so we spend our lifetime trying to define ourselves. And let me back up because one thing really struck me about the rapport setting we just had, and that was how. I think for a lot of people in the room, if not everybody, that the object of your attention during that period of time was still silence. And that's really unusual because if you meditate by yourself, that cycle that Mike talked about, the circle where you drift into thought, I mean, that happens even in a rapport setting, but there a level of intensity I felt in that session, and I think it's not rare for rapport. I mean, that's a fairly common thing to happen. It gives you an opportunity for your attention to just lock onto still silence. You're not thinking, but you're not asleep. And I think that's really an important place for your attention to be. You're not looking away from anything. You're looking directly into something in your core. So if you're always, what occupies your attention? What are you looking at? You're always looking at something. And we all look in mirrors a lot. Every morning you do your daily toiletry or whatever. You wash your face, brush your teeth. You look in a mirror. You get dressed. You look in a mirror. We all look in mirrors quite a bit. So it occurred to me, when you looked into a mirror, where would your attention land if your reflection wasn't there? If you walked up to a mirror and just walked right up to it, and boom, instantaneously, the image of your body didn't get reflected back. Everything else was there except yourself. Where would your attention land? For a moment, you might be, you'd be stunned, you'd be surprised, but then it would possibly land on this sense of you looking into the mirror. You have this sense of, the sense of I am. And I think that's part of the reflection too. That's something, that's the sense of I am, the sense of your individual consciousness, your individual identity is another object of your attention. It's part of the experience. So this life occurs from birth to death, and my mom is getting close to the end, and so I'm thinking it's been on my mind a lot lately, and watching what's occupying her attention right now. And to people, I guess I'm maybe since I was with my dad when he died, I've become obsessed with or attuned to what's on people's minds when they die. There's a process they go through. I'm not holding myself up as an expert on that process, but I'm very interested in what they think about it. I mean, what occupies their attention? Because I think you're never going to be more honest with yourself or more interested in looking at stuff than, not at stuff, but you're not just going to be, your attention's not going to be grabbed by everything that goes by, like flipping TV channels. You're going to be really looking back on your life or looking forward to what's around the corner. And I think it'd be interesting to, imagine the two endpoints and just compress the whole thing together. What is occupying your attention? I did a talk here a number of years ago. It was a talk about going within, and I came up with this chart. I called it the object of the attention. And I was surprised by when I saw Michael's chart today. Is Michael here? I was tempted to pull out my little copy of my chart and tape it on there, because even though the language is utterly and completely different, I see a distinct similarity in the chart. And my chart talks about experience, and the object of our attention is experience, and that experience is either everything either magnifies or diminishes us. And I mean, everyone's here. A lot of people here have heard me talk along those lines before, so maybe it's repetitive to say that, but there's a lot of similarity in even the lines that he draws through there. So the point of that was that the process of spiritual path, going within. Part of that experience is a loss of self. The process of going within is experienced as a loss of self, and we fight that. And the way we fight it is we look away from things that create any sense of diminishment. We try to replace it with something that is, something that's positive, or at least, less diminishing. So, I'm kind of, like I said, I guess I better not lean too far to the left here. I don't want to just sit here and babble, but, I'm just kind of saying a few things that were on my mind. I do want to read this exchange I had with a longtime friend, and it was a recent letter I got, and I thought it's kind of generic in that it might apply. A lot of people here might relate to it. So why don't I read that? I'm not able to attend meetings with anybody right now. My wife works a great deal and often travels for her job. I have our 2 girls to take care of, and on the occasion we are all together, we mostly do family stuff. My situation is what it is. I don't fool myself that it is my practice. I just find myself here. Still, the upshot is that I feel isolated and unable to discuss these matters honestly with anyone. Anyway, is there any point whatsoever to studying scriptures and talks? Something drives me to study a little bit every morning. To quit by force seems as though it would be artificial, a formal austerity that would create more difficulty for me than it would remove. And yet, what could I read that would change anything significant for me? It's all just a flurry of words, most of them in endless contradiction to each other. Even though I could never have admitted this to myself then, for a long time I thought in my correspondence with you that you could carry the weight for me, that sooner or later you'd give me the turning word and it would all be accomplished, whatever it was. Am I still just fooling myself with study, hiding from a sense of lack that I can't bear to face? When I'm totally honest, I have to acknowledge that there is a fear of not having some spiritual identity to act from, even though this identity itself is constantly shifting. It feels like a sort of vertigo. If I didn't have this seeking, studying, practicing, whatever it is, then what would I be? How would I keep going? Without the seeking identity, I'd be just a completely ordinary person, which seems like an unbearable darkness. I sense that I have to get more serious, but I feel that I don't know how. You've said that when you got married and started your family, your identity as a seeker faded, but you knew that the inner looking continued inevitably. Would you be willing to say something more about this? I don't sense that my seeker identity is fading. I've been exhausted for some time with chasing after religious identities, but it keeps happening. So my reply back was, it sounds to me that you find your family life fulfilling, and of course that's good, but of course it's not enough. I think it is very useful to study the literature of spirituality to help pry the attention loose from the barrage of banality that lifestyles like yours and mine engenders, as long as it doesn't become a substitute for or crowd out a daily remembrance of oneself, by which I mean a simple sitting in silence with the attention directed inward to look at what is really going on in one's life, and especially one's inner life. And I think it takes an emotional element to do that. If I or the stranger you encounter by chance could provide that turning word, you would only be able to hear it if you have the elevated and chronic doubt sensation lingering in the background that comes from such a daily remembrance. Otherwise, you see and hear primarily what affirms your personality and state of mind and allays any self-doubts. I'm not referring to conventional notions of confidence. I'm talking about foundational doubts about what one's life is all about. It is not possible for you or anyone really to be less than totally honest with yourself. And we all talk about, you got to be honest with yourself. I don't think how could you lie to yourself? You really, you don't really lie to yourself. It is only possible to look away from what that honesty reveals, to ignore what one sees, to layer some other interpretation on top as a substitute that is more acceptable, less threatening, more comfortable. And there are multiple layers of this protection. So you really can't lie to yourself. You see what you need to see, but you look away from it. You either look away from it by thinking of, diverting your attention to something else or layering something else on top of it. What do you see when you look into a mirror? What do you think in that first millisecond of that seeing, before what is seen is comfortably familiar? That familiarity is your conviction that you are what is seen. You disagree because you think you know that you are not the reflected body image, but are instead the one perceiving that image. That too is part of the reflection. So the sight of your reflection is comforting and reinforcing. But where would your attention land if you looked into that mirror and it failed to reflect back your image? It dawned on me after I wrote this letter that that's what a lot of Harding's exercises are about. Where does your attention land? Momentarily, your attention would coast and land on the sensation of yourself looking with fear and surprise. That sense of you looking is also a reflection. Where would the attention land if that sensation of looking likewise vanished with the image of you? So what would the I think the object of the attention during this rapport transcended you even looking, feeling the sense of I am. I mean, that's how it felt for me, and I felt that's how it was for many people in the room. This is the block, that you are somehow independent of that reflection in the mirror, that you are somehow anterior to it, that you are somehow independent of the body and can continue to be you when that body returns to dust. As if the thoughts you think and the feelings you feel that comprise that sense of I am have a life independent of the reflection in the mirror. Something gives rise to that misplaced conviction. However, nothing whatsoever of you will remain when all the reflections you watch are removed. You can't make yourself serious. You don't decide to be serious. You are already serious. You live that seriousness by cultivating the openness to see clearly and to look. You won't see anything without having a look, and you can only hope and pray that you can see beyond what defines and affirms the reflected you. I used to literally pray before my meditation. I had a little prayer. Went something like, bless me, Father, that I might see clearly. Because I just knew that, if the whole idea was to do self-inquiry, that obviously I couldn't see myself as I was objectively, and I couldn't see the world clearly. So I prayed for the blessing of clarity, being able to see clearly. And then I prayed for grace that I could understand what I would see. And then I prayed for strength that I could live my understanding. So that just kind of set a certain mood for me, and maybe it was my Catholic upbringing that I like rituals, and it was my little ritual to set my meditation going. Regarding my past comments about getting married, etc., I did not think at the time that any inner looking was continuing of its own momentum. My identity as a seeker faded when I gave up hope of being rewarded for it, which happened to Bart in the course of one, a ride in the taxi in the airplane. This what I'm speaking of here happened to me, I don't know, maybe 2 years before I got my answer. My identity as a seeker faded when I gave up hope of being rewarded for it. I was quite sure I'd missed the boat and would not be rewarded. Rose was not sending the wheelbarrow for me after all. I really believed that for so many years. I just I thought that he thought that I was special, and that he was working on me. It was just a matter of time. But the time was running out because I was getting older and older, and he was starting to fade. Absent that hope, the circumstances I found myself in generated the doubt sensation, and I did nothing about it other than stare into it without choice. So in hindsight, I saw that there was a momentum to my seeking. And I had that thought when I was listening to Michael give his talk, because, the effortless part in the 5-year period for him was preceded by 20 years of dedicated effort. And I can't help but wonder if maybe he had some momentum that enabled the effortlessness. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not discounting what he said either. I don't know if somebody 19 years old, which is how old I was when I met Richard Rose, I don't know that in 5 years' time, I don't think well, I mean, the bottom line is I probably wouldn't have been capable of doing what he said I should be doing, but I think, well, I think momentum is a factor. Um, and I saw that there was a momentum to my seeking, and that momentum was the looking. So that when I stopped looking with selfish motivation, what I started to see softened me up and opened my ears for those turning words from Pulyan, the same words that many, many others have read in his letters without similar effect. One other thing that caught my ears during Michael's talk, and by the way, I have to say, Michael, I loved his talk. I mean, I've heard him, Michael, he has, he has his talks are basically cover the same material. I mean, he has a philosophies that he's putting across or teaching, and I have to say, this was it was the best he's ever done. I mean, it was so well done. I really enjoyed listening to him. But one thing he said during there was about somebody asked him the question about they've read it written that you need a burning desire. I think Ramana Maharshi talked about burning desire, and Mike said he thought maybe you needed a burning desire to be free of pain or whatever. But if where would that? I mean, where would the burning? What puts you in pain in the first place? I mean, to me, the both things spring from the same place. A burning desire to find the truth is coming from exactly the same place as a burning desire to be free of pain, and it gets back to the need to define yourself. And where did that need itself arise from? It's like it's like maybe the first time you became self-aware, became, when after conception, at some point in your development, you became an aware individual. There's some point where individuality comes into being, or manifestation would be a better word. And maybe in that instance, the mental image I get is of the mirror goes up because there's this individuality, but where are your boundaries? What are you? Where are you? And so the first chance you have to look and see what you are, maybe there's a direct connection at the very beginning. But as soon as experience kicks in, it's the equivalent of holding up a mirror. And before that reflection can make eye contact with you, it turns around and it just gets into the whole world. And now you're looking out at experience. And something is still watching that, what you perceive to be you. I mean, the I am, but that I am is now doing everything in its power to define itself, because there's a primal pain there. Sounds kind of like a dramatic phrase, but I think that's the source of the burning desire to not be separate from the source. And the pain comes in the further out we go to define ourselves, which is 180 degrees different from what the remedy is. The more the pain increases. I mean, it's not like we're the pain is not. It's not like a toothache. I mean, it's not something that preoccupies your attention all the time, but it's in the background. And so I really like how Michael explained all these things getting layered over and over. I could relate to what he said. So that's all I got. You'll have to you'll have to.
So at that time, at that point, prior to that, when the self-awareness comes in, you are, at that point, you are at the source or at the one. And so
It's just to start over again. You say it. So at that point,
at the point, you said there's a point in time when you're first come into the world, you're born, and then the I am kicks in, like you become self-aware.
yeah, and I presume this happens at some point in the womb because it's scientifically known. I mean, we know that before a baby comes out, it has heard its mother's voice. It can.
So it's even prior to birth.
Well, it's sometime after an egg becomes fertilized, but before the baby comes out of the womb. At some point, I think it's precisely when the machinery is developed enough to register the first experience. It's like, okay, so it's like, I mean, Rose, there's a whole section in his meditation paper where he gets into AMPP and PMP, adjusted mind projected perception, all that stuff that I never understood when I was reading it all those years ago. But so I think the individual consciousness comes into manifests with the first percept, the first registration. There's no thinking at that point. It's just like there's the light, the absolute, God is omnipresent, and this form is developing in within God, within the absolute. And at some point, this form this machinery is capable of registering a perception. At that moment, that's when that individuality potential comes into existence. And then after that, with the second percept, now it's like depth perception. And then that's the beginning of the chain reaction. At that moment in time, there's an individual consciousness developing. And then, but it's so at one with its mother, and it presumably doesn't experience a whole lot of pain in the womb. I mean, it's being continuously fed. The being wants for nothing. It's in a perfect environment. And then, whoom, that comes to an abrupt end. There's no intellectual capacity to be, there's not thinking going on about the experience of birth and all that, but the consciousness, the experience is in play, and the experience starts off with pain. And
would you say that the pain is from that, or the pain is from the yearning or the separation from that which once was? Like
one's an echo of the other. One's I mean, to me, the thing that sums up the whole notion of where does our need to define ourselves come from? It comes from what we are, and it's the hound of heaven. I mean, I love that poem because that's what it's describing so poignantly. And I mean, we've all, pretty much everybody here has watched kids grow up. I mean, I know not everybody here has kids, but we've all gone through the experience of growing up, and there's all these bumps along the way, and they all come down to things that remind us of our mortality. And especially for me, I mean, this is how I got into spiritual work. I met Rose when I was 19. I got into this because I was really suffering from facing the world, not knowing what I wanted to be, and feeling I have to take my place in the world. I've been living this sheltered life, being at home, being in school. It's like my identity was very narrowly confined, and even that was it had its ups and downs, feeling like I do exist, and I am okay, and So I was kind of terrified of the world. And when I went to this introductory lecture on Zen by Richard Rose at Kent State in 1973, he gave me the perfect escape. I say that because in hindsight, I realized it was kind of a rationalization, but it was inspirational to me at the time. And the escape was, well, here's what you can become. You can become a spiritual seeker, and you can, the most important thing you could become is not a doctor or a lawyer or a businessman, but it would be a spiritual person who would find out what your true nature is, and nothing else mattered until you did that. And so, I had a spiritual calling, I feel, and so that appealed to me, but it also really got me off the hook. And I feel that young people, well, everybody, but particularly young people that are on the cusp from transitioning from, well, I'm just growing up, I'm developing, and then once they become an adult or transitioning into adulthood, it's like, okay, what are you going to do with your life? And the difficulty in committing to a decision there is that once you do that, it fixes the end point. So as soon as you fix the end point, that is a very diminishing experience. Whether you realize it consciously or not, because it fixes your mortality. It's a symbol of your mortality. Okay, I'm gonna. Well, you've heard the jokes. So it's like, well, you get married, you have a family, and then you die. Or the jokes about you do A, B, C, and then you die. I don't remember consciously thinking that. Rose always talked about people having a fear of death, but I was never conscious of being afraid of death. But I look back on it, and it was there. It was there the way death was an abstraction, but what was not an abstraction was my identity. And I'm trying to build my identity and define myself. And so anything, I was hypersensitive to anything that might call anything into question about it. And I don't know, making a fixed commitment, that fixed the line, somehow I think generates some doubt about it.
I just wanted to shift gears for one moment. I was sitting here listening to Bart talk about the feeling in the heart, of the heart opening and exploding, and I just wanted to share something that happened earlier this afternoon, which was I took a trip along the trail to the Hare Krishna temple and walked around and went in the shop. And as I was leaving, there were two devotees there, and they were wearing robes, and we're approaching them, and they said, Hare Krishna, and I don't know what the etiquette is. I just kind of put my hands together like that, and hope that would suffice.
Rama Rama or Hare Krishna back.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I need to listen to more George Harrison. But as I was walking by, I don't know if one or both they like blew kisses or something, and it was, and I walked past. I said, it just felt so good, It was like this acknowledgement of just love, That I've never met them before, and it just hit me in my heart.
What were you feeling before that happened? Before they blew the kisses, what were you feeling towards them?
I would say it felt neutral,
Okay.
There was, I was with someone else. I was more focused on, we were kind of having a conversation, and we just approached them, and they were, just kind of, how can I say it? Like, they were like side players in my movie, they were,
Yeah. So
they weren't supposed to have a speaking part in it, but they did.
So how it strikes me just is that you didn't know exactly how to react, right? So, but you wanted to acknowledge them, and so you say you're neutral, and accept that from their perspective. They probably encounter a lot of people who are negative or critical, right? So you weren't maybe you were a little bit critical in your attitude, or maybe you were completely neutral. But wait. So I'm my take on why you were found it moving.
I just wanted to share that, and that's all.
So when you were moved by the fact that they just accepted you as you were and were not going to be offended or anything by you, and were just returned goodwill back towards you. I think that's laudable. That somebody's going to say, "Hey, how we don't know how you feel. However you feel is fine, but we wish you well."
And I guess if anything, it woke up in me how I would like to really view everybody as as precious and like a brother. I mean, it's just easy to get really caught into my just.
Do you think you're a critical person? Do you think you often are think critically about?
If anything, I'm more on the aloof side.
Well, it's a form of being critical. I mean, isn't it? Because aloof is, and I think it implies. Why would you be aloof?
Just more like carefree, like it's like not. It's not. I don't experience it as critical. It's more like, whatever. I don't. Just the way I'm wired, I guess. But I just wanted to share that it just felt really nice, and just open my eyes to being more conscious, I guess, of everyone.
So if the tables had been turned, do you think you would have reacted that way?
If the tables
if the roles had been reversed, would you have been the one blowing kisses?
Probably not. And that's what I'm saying. It kind of. I think it's whether I don't think I have to. I could just do it. It doesn't have to. It could be a mental process. Just there was a point where I was feel like blessing people when I'd see them. And just coming from there, and that kind of, it's like the clouds in the sky, that phase kind of left, and I think it's just really nice acknowledgement.
Hey, I got something else I want to read. It's really short, and it's from I Am That, Nisargadatta, and it was I read it as the inspirational intro that so many of us like to do with our talks, start with a small. I read this at my talk on the Going Within some years ago. Anyway, this is called Obsession with the Body. It's from I Am That. I see what you too could see here and now, but for the wrong focus of your attention. You give no attention to yourself. Your mind is all with things, people, and ideas, never with yourself. Bring yourself into focus. Become aware of your own existence. See how you function. Watch the motives and the results of your actions. Study the prison you have built around yourself by inadvertence. By knowing what you are not, you come to know yourself. The way back to yourself is through refusal and rejection. One thing is certain, the real is not imaginary. It is not a product of the mind. Even the sense, I am, is not continuous, though it is a useful pointer. It shows where to seek, but not what to seek. Just have a good look at it. Once you are convinced that you cannot say truthfully about yourself anything except I am, and that nothing that can be pointed at can be yourself, the need for the I am is over. And you are no longer intent on verbalizing what you are. All you need is to get rid of the tendency to define yourself. All definitions apply to your body only and to its expressions. Once this obsession with the body goes, you will revert to your natural state, spontaneously and effortlessly. We discover this by being earnest, by searching and inquiring, questioning daily and hourly, by giving one's life to this discovery. So there's a lot in that, some paradoxes in there, you know. It's effortless, but you got to be earnest for a lifetime, every day and every hour, but it's effortless. And you know, follow the I am, but the I am is not really the end all or goal. So it looks to me like that's what we're doing with we're all doing that with our lives anyway. We're all on a spiritual search in that regard. We're all doing some level of self-inquiry because we're very attuned to all the nuances of the experiences that we have that magnify and diminish us, and anything that comes in on the diminishment side of the equation, we do something about, and we have to look at it for a minute. We're aware of it. If we you know, it registers. So that's a little spark of self-inquiry maybe, and we can't lie to ourselves about it. We know that we got angry. We know that, you know, somebody said something and just, you know, we bristled at it, but then we immediately spin it back on the other person. You know, that other person is the problem, or has this fault, or whatever, and we're constantly spinning everything like that. That's what my diagram actually showed. You know, it's kind of like the experiences are coming in, and the things that diminish it, we spin it back into a positive, and it goes around. And it just reminded me of those lines there. They were resistance lines, you know, because it's when you start to go within and experience a loss of self, of what you've come to believe yourself to be, which is, you know, the body / personality identity. You've got to look away from it or spin it back into something that magnifies you. What else was it about this? This is one of my favorite quotes from that book. Of course, it's not hard to find good quotes in it. All you need is to get rid of the tendency to define yourself. Well, he almost trivializes it, you know. It's more than a tendency, and it's something you can actually get rid of. It's the way you're built. But, you know, when you're close to death, you'll be looking a whole lot more intently at it. Oh, and the other thing in here, it's striking me how I find I can't read anything in that book, I Am That, without thinking about correlations. My mind correlates it with teachings that I got from Richard Rose over the years. He used a different language, and he tended to avoid a lot of the flowery. Most of the quotes people quote from the Sargadatta are the more talking about the end result, you know, what. I mean, it's really kind of a depiction of what enlightenment is, or what the experience of it is, or what the realization's about. And Rose really went out of his way to avoid that. But when the Sargadatta talks about what the path is, I just find over and over things that they're almost literally, I mean, well, not word for word, but he's saying the same thing.
I hear you being somewhat critical, it sounds like, of your path, at least the early years of your 19, is that it was actually a way of avoiding things.
Maybe I left.
Is there a lesson learned from that you can
Well, I'm glad you asked.
going through the same thing?
I'm glad you asked that question because I see that I could leave the wrong impression. I'm kind of what am I trying to say? Noticing that my decision, that for me it was an escape, is just kind of an insight I had. But to me, it's a completely separate. It's a good thing that I didn't. I'm grateful that I didn't think that back when I was 19 years old, saying, "Oh, well, that would just be a rationalization," to avoid having to make the tough decision. So I don't think I'll pursue this spiritual stuff. I'm glad that I made the decision to pursue it. And I don't know that I could have done it any differently anyway, because I don't know what else I would have done. That's what I was led to do. And I think actually, I think the discipline of the kind of the lifestyle and the mental discipline of challenging your thinking, waking up, even on a mundane level, just instead of just being walking around hypnotized by everything you hear and see, like paying attention instead of listening to the ads on the TV, look at them like you're the editor, that you're the writer, and so you're not sucked into the ad. You're watching what the ad's about, and it was like Rose kind of trained us somehow to have a critical look at things with a critical eye. And so I think all pretty much everything I did at his behest in service of a spiritual path has served me well in the mundane world, in the mundane work world.
So, for somebody who started pretty young, comparatively, is there anything looking back on that stretch that you see as valuable places to look or stumbling blocks for other people that are young, like me, obviously?
Do you have anything specific in mind? I get the sense that you have some additional thinking behind that question, but you don't have to get into it if you don't want.
Well, I'm thinking specifically relating to discipline, or using it as using the spiritual path as a way to circumvent going into the real world, which I've seen that in my own life.
Well, in that regard, Rose actually encouraged me and most people to keep pursuing, to have some career path. He believed in, he said every time you take a job, you should take a better job. There's nothing wrong with making money, and actually, he was not. He wasn't an advocate of the monastic lifestyle. He was very much in favor of living a spiritual path that was living a lifestyle that was conducive to clear thinking and conserving your energy so you could apply it to your priorities while you were in the world. If people were in school, he said stay in school. He didn't encourage anybody to drop out of school. Of course, he balanced that by saying, your work is just your begging bowl. You're not going to have two or three top priorities in life and accomplish any one of them. Your top priority had to be your spiritual work, and your career everything needed to come second to that. Is the way he put it out there. So, at the other end, philosophically, you can say, you can debate that point, but when you're on the starting point, I think it's good advice. I don't think you should apply a lot of the conclusions that you get from spiritual books relating to, well, okay, like Michael's talking, he was trying to be controversial and mention that you have, the free will is an illusion. You don't have any free will. Well, that's very good to provoke thought and challenge you, but as long as you feel that you exist as an individual entity, and if you don't get out of bed, nobody's going to come to your bed with a spoon and feed you, so you survive, and then I guess you got to take action to feed yourself. For me, I wanted to, maybe this is a Catholic idea that was instilled in me, but my goal was to figure out what my career path was, and wanted my avocation and my vocation to be the same. I wanted to, I guess I believed what I was taught as a Catholic school kid, that there was a plan for every person, so there's no free will, right? The plan was already decided. There was something that I was supposed to do, but I didn't know what it was. And so I put a lot of effort, I think, into trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. So I'm putting out effort. I'm working as though I have the free will to do that, to figure out what my destiny is. So it was a paradox. And the other thing about, I think you have to be engaged in the world to generate the feedback loop that throws you back on yourself. You don't get if you want to minimize the diminishment experiences, the things that throw you back on yourself because it challenges your identity and makes you think, gives you an opportunity to stare directly into your source. If you want to minimize all that, I suspect that a monastic lifestyle might do that. Of course, I'm not an expert on monastic lifestyles. Maybe what goes on in the I'm going by what Rose talked about, because he was in that setting for early in his life, and the way he described it was it tended to put you to sleep. So maybe I shouldn't criticize it, but one thing I know for sure is you get out in the everyday work world where you're rubbing shoulders with the rest of humanity, and you're going to get have conflict left and right of things that are going to make you go home every night and think, there are opportunities for self-inquiry. Well, one of the earliest experiences I had with Rose, the lecture in Kent, he talked about milk, what he called milk from thorns, and he talked about when something provokes anger in you, instead of getting angry, notice that you're angry, and instead then stop right then and there and use the energy of that anger back to look inside yourself. And he said that, and shortly after that, like in a matter of days, I had an experience that just sent my head spinning. I was rooming with a guy. I was living at going to Kent State University, and living off campus in an apartment with a guy that was a couple years older than me, and I felt like he dominated me, and because it was his place, I moved in. He was already there, and I felt like I was being crowded, but I was shy and whatnot, so I kind of put up with it. And then one day there was some issue over the dishes. He just asked something like, "Well, did you do the dishes yet?" We took turns, but it was just, and I just immediately got angry. And in that instant, I remembered what I just heard at that session, and because I remembered it, the anger immediately dissipated, and I became really introspective. And I put my coat on as fast as I could because I had to get away from him so I could think. And so I went on this long walk, and it's like a bomb went off in my head. I felt like part of the combination was being exposed to all these ideas of a couple lectures from Rose. And then this event happened that created this wad of energy, and I put it back into my mind, and now my mind was like doing a reorg. It was like the whole database was getting reorged with all this new information. So that was, to me, that was I never forgot that. It was like the example of the power of using negative emotions or any kind of diminishment experience as the fuel for self-inquiry. Of course, he said you can't do it when you can't be angry and meditate. You have to get past the anger. So, and this was such a trivial incident of anger. It was pretty easy to get past, but I still had the energy from it. Alan, you had something to say.
Yeah, you just popped in my mind that whole question of I can never say that word, monastic.
Monastic?
Yeah. When I was in India.
It's a scary word.
Yeah, I had this quick experience with this. I wanted to get into the long story, but it was a very quick experience. And a very old man, and I just happened to find it had all these wrinkles and looked 100 years old and had these beautiful blue eyes. He looked at my eyes, and he said, "Your challenge is to balance, what's the word? Oh my God, I forget the word. Householder. Householder and the mystic." He said, "That's your challenge. Can you balance monk and householder?" So that's what I've been trying to do, is to live as a householder, as a married person, but at the same time to carry the monk and to attempt to balance those two dynamics. And I think that's it's been a wonderful challenge for me, to live in both worlds and to feed from both. And I think you said it very well, because the one world really can feed the other, but it's a very tough line, especially in dealing with women, to kind of deal with that dynamic. Very tough.
Well, that's why I read that letter from that, because I thought it was, he's a householder, and it's just, I don't know if it wasn't like dramatically profound or anything, but it was very sincere, and I thought it was kind of universal.
And Hindu talks about that. They really say that they should be separate. You should either be a monk or a householder. And so this guy said, no, you try to integrate.
I think Rose would be in the latter camp. He thought you should be a householder, although when he was talking to a group of 19 to early 20-year-olds, his point was to delay the householder part in terms of marriage and whatnot. And he thought.
The other thing I would add is, once you're a monk, you're a monk. No matter whether you're having sex or whatever you call that stuff, it really doesn't matter. Because once you cross over to the other side, you're just on that other side.
Well, I have a saying about that stuff, and the experience is binding. An intense experience is intensely binding. And sex is a pretty intense experience. Of course, pain can be intense. So experience of pain can bind people, and I've seen examples of this. People go through really, really traumatic injuries or ordeals of one sort, and it doesn't necessarily make them introspective, because it's such an intense experience. It actually locks them into an identity.
For me, there was nothing more exciting than transformation. Transformation. Much more than sex. And sex has been wonderful.
Really good.
There's one behind
Is
you.
it Mary Beth?
And just because, all right, and these things never work for me anyhow. But I've been, just kind of a little bit lost. But when you were talking about pain, I can relate to pain and pain being binding. And a conversation that we were having earlier when we were talking in here, like where I am, get to the heart of the matter, right? Okay, so I'm here because I want to get enlightened, right? And that's the heart of the matter. And I've been wanting to get enlightened as far as I can remember all my freaking life, And I never had Rose or you know. I mean, I did want to be a nun and all that. But what I realized just recently in reading Eckhart Tolle and talking about the pain body, because I am so identified with pain.
Yeah, I like what he writes about that.
And I am a householder, whatever you call it. But, so I mean, I have all of that stuff to do, but always, I want to get enlightened still. But what I recognized is my pain brings me back to the quest always. If I get distracted in life, when I'm in any kind of pain, it's going to bring me right back to, okay, what's the point of this? And also I've realized that when life was good, I had everything I wanted, the emptiness of life and the pain of the pointlessness of it brings me back to the quest. So always the pain brings me back to the quest.
Well, pleasure doesn't inspire you to go sit in a corner and think.
But what I finally realized is that my pain body, part of my pain body was my identity as a quester. Is that, this whole thing is like, like God, I want to get, and so it was like I realized all of this pain associated with being on the path and not getting anywhere. And so now where I'm at is like trying to let go of wanting to get there and just kind of like be there.
Well, it's been a while since I've read his book, but I think when he writes about the pain body, he writes about the attachment to it. People get attached, becomes part of the identity, right?
Right.
And when you say that, sounds like I'm shifting gears, but I'm not. When you say that you want enlightenment, of course you have to create a definition of that for yourself, because how can you can't know what something is that you don't already have, right? So you have an idea of what it is. So it's kind of it calls into question. So what is it that you really want? It's like saying I want Acme. So you have a concept of, so my concept of whatever is that it will, for most people, that it will add something to me. It'll add happiness, or it'll add peace of mind. I mean, it might do those things, but it's not going to, if it adds anything to you, it's not going to add anything to you before it takes everything else away.
Yeah.
What is your question about the pain, though? I mean, I made the comment about Tolle because it sounded like where you're going is that you become identified with your pain, and so you're thinking that the way to stop identifying that is to say, okay, I don't want enlightenment anymore.
Exactly.
That's kind of why I talked about it.
Exactly.
I said, well, but you didn't, what was it that you really wanted in the first place? You want free of the pain. So you really haven't changed what you want.
No, wait. No, I'm getting confused. No, I want to know what the fuck I'm doing here. You know what I mean? And to me, that's like enlightenment. Like, know who you are. What's your purpose? What am I doing here? Always. What am I doing here? Like I said, the pain leads you back on, whether it's, the pain of life itself or the pain of, the pointlessness of life. I mean, in other words, a death, a loss, or, grief or something, or just realizing that what's the point of all of this? You know what I mean? And so then that makes you go back on the path to try to figure out who you are, what you're doing here. Right?
How do you see your path? And what comprises a path for you?
Just that, trying to figure out who I am.
How do you do that? I mean,
How do I do
individually. Yeah, I mean, besides coming to meetings like this.
Praying, writing, going to 12 steps, looking at myself, trying to just be aware of what's going on, who I am, what I think, what I feel.
Do you meditate?
Yeah, I meditate now. I had tried to meditate before and I couldn't meditate. I mean, because I thought there was a perfect way to meditate and I wasn't able to stop my thoughts. And so then I just decided that meditation is a practice, kind of like, being a lawyer. For some reason that connected me, because I thought, okay, it's a practice, so I don't have to know how to do it. I just have to keep doing it. So I've made a commitment, and I do that every day to meditate.
And what is meditation to you?
What is meditation to me? Sitting down, being quiet, and just kind of like what he said. I've actually tried some other things too, like okay, trying to feel, like if I have a feeling, okay, bring up, like I'll just tell you, I bring up a story, and then it raises a feeling, then you try to get rid of the story, you know what I mean, and you go down, 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 sit with the story. That's one thing. Or I've asked like my feelings to sit with me, and then you just bow to them and just let them sit there and see what they are. And I've had some kind of interesting experiences with that. Or just be still and do the mantra, and just do that kind of. But I always kind of feel like I'm dreaming, then come out of it. So that was kind of interesting that he said that, because that's my experience. I feel like I'm dreaming, and then I come out of it and get centered again. And so that was kind of interesting to see that I'm doing that right. I mean, or at least it followed his pattern. But my point was, when we were talking, so I'm reached the point now where I want to quit trying, because I recognize that I try too much. So I'm trying to quit trying. And then somebody had said that you need to keep trying.
And
And I don't know if I should quit trying or keep trying.
well, I guess, you can find 10 people with 10 different answers. I can give you my answer. I mean, if myself, the advice that I got and the advice that I took was that I meditated on trauma. So I looked at afflictions to the sense of self. And the way I would explain how that practice should be done, and Rose always talked about it's difficult to look at an immediate affliction to the sense of self, because you can't look at something while you're angry. It's kind of like you have to transcend the anger and then look at it. So it's easier to do that with something happened 5 years ago. Maybe you can look at something from a year ago, 3 months ago, last week. It might be pretty hard, but and so what do you actually do? The advice was, okay, you watch the event. You don't relive it, but you look at what happened. You look at the circumstances and what triggered the anger or the whatever the emotion was, and that's gonna immediately generate a lot of thought. And it's at that point that I can relate to Michael's system of meditation, because I think the same pattern occurs there. So what I would say that I like his system, except I like the mantra to be the affliction to the sense of self. I think with every experience of diminishment or affliction to the sense of self, for an instant, just you're in one timeless instant, you are absolutely directly open. You have an open pathway to see back all the way to your source. But you instantly look away, because going within is a experience of loss of self, and that's painful. So you instantly look away, and that looking away is experienced as this rush of thought. It's not like the rush of thought that you get when you examine stuff. Really in real time, when something negative happens to you and you get this rush of thought, it's the same reaction that you would get if in meditation you looked at something that was not cold enough, and you almost relive it, and you get the same reaction. But when the thing first kicks in, when there's that experience of loss of self, it's a little micro speck of the experience of loss of self when you're about to stare into your death, because at that point that's big. It's you're gonna. I've watched people die. There is an awareness that this is it, time up, game over. Where am I going? I saw this in the case of my father, and he went to church, but he wasn't a particularly religious man. So I could imagine there's people they've just hypnotized themselves or had some level of spiritual experience that convinces them of what the result is. And so they go to their deathbed with this absolute conviction that the relatives are going to come out and greet them. I've heard my sister-in-law literally talk about this, that, here's what happened. She was telling her mother, who's has cancer and is dying. She's telling us how she told her mother, well, she said, what's going to happen to me? She said, well, the angels are going to come and they're going to carry you into heaven. And some people believe that so firmly, they think when they're on their deathbed, they don't have that, they aren't open to the sense of final confrontation. So I'm kind of going on and on about that, but I really believe that there's a direct opening to your source in that moment, but that you don't take it. You can't. I mean, it's not. I don't know that it's not like a matter of choice. It's because your vector, your momentum, has been since the time you were born about all the actions and behaviors, and the object of your attention is going to be things that reinforce the external you, the identity of you, your personality, your ego, anything that reinforces affirms your bodily existence. And you're not going to look at things that contradict that. And so you look away from that opportunity and you get into all of the reaction patterns, and which are all defense mechanisms. Am I making any sense? A little bit?
Yeah, except that but I feel doomed. I feel doomed by what you just said.
Well, you know what? Maybe that could be a good thing.
It's pointless.
You are doomed. I mean, ultimately you are doomed. You know what the end game is.
No, but you say that I won't look. Well, I want to look.
Okay. But I just explained myself. It's not a volitional thing. It's the way the machinery is built. It's like you've got this momentum. That's why Rose talked about becoming a vector. You have to establish a habit of looking. It's like, the cliche is, okay, something goes, if you're an alcoholic and you're trying to get off the booze, something bad happens and boom, how do you react? You go back on the bottle, so something painful happened, and how do you deal with the pain? You look away from it, you just get drunk. That way you don't have to think about it. So that's been the habit. So you have to establish a vector of looking, a habit of looking honestly, and you do that. The vector gets to the point that then just it happens automatically. It's like when I got to the point when through this momentum of years and years of
All right, then I guess my question is, because I do that. I look at my thing.
well, then you're
okay. Do you reach a point where you have to quit looking? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you don't know. But you don't know in that you can't decide. Oh well, I guess it's time to quit looking now and give me my reward. I did. I deposited it. I put in the I bought the CD. I worked really hard to earn all the money. I bought the CD. I put it in there. Now I'm ready.
But doesn't there come a point where it becomes counterproductive?
Yeah, but you're not in a position to gauge that. Is the problem?
Well, who would gauge it?
It happens when it's, it happens at the right time. For some people, they spend their whole life. I mean, look at Bart, poor soul. He just, he was 20 years old when he was in Vietnam, and then went all those years, and he worked hard at it. I think, didn't you, Bart? You worked really hard at this.
Didn't you quit looking?
Yeah, but you can't decide to quit. Quitting happens because you've exhausted it. You broke all your tools and you've exhausted all the possibilities. It's not an intellectual decision.
You can't expect
you can't ask around and take a poll of whether you should quit or not. You're either going to be compelled to quit or compelled to seek. Either way, it's not up to you. If you're unsure,
But even in the quitting is a seeking.
You get caught up in your underwear, though. I mean, don't overthink it. Either you are compelled to do one or the other. So one of those options you can't not do. It's not an intellectual decision.
Yeah.
You're going to walk out of here this weekend. You're going to do one or the other. You're either going to keep going or you're going to quit.
Well,
It's not up to you. It's not an intellectual decision.
And whichever you do will be the right decision for you.
It's not. You're not doing it. You're not doing it. None of this is up to you. You leave here, and one or the other things will happen.
maybe when I'm saying quitting, it's not the same thing as what you're thinking.
Maybe you don't like his answer.
I mean, I don't mean giving up on the, but I mean quit trying so hard,
Still, it's not going to be up to you.
Mary Beth, I think
You can't decide to quit trying so hard, and you can't. It's just not going to be something that you have that degree of control over. Mike's talking about control in his talk today. You want to have control over this, and you don't. You don't have control over it. Just let it roll. Whatever happens is going to be the right thing.
Well, that's kind of like quitting.
Okay, then do that. I think this horse has been sufficiently whipped.
I think you want to be rewarded. You want a reward for you.
What
And
do you
that's a
feel?
formula for not getting there. When my seeking turned the corner is when I got to the point where I didn't stop. I came to the conclusion that I failed at it.
You quit.
No, there's a difference. I couldn't quit. I mean, I thought I quit, but there was a momentum going.
Right.
Well, you don't know when that's going to happen. So, like Bart said, you're going to do what you want to do anyway, and so quit and see where that gets you. Hey,
Somebody take this.
I'm saying, see where it gets you. You might be right. It might be time.
I got a different question. In passing, when you were reading the email, you mentioned the passage in the Pullion letter that triggered something for you, and I wondered if you would, say that passage and talk a little bit about how it struck you.
The passage was, the context for it, because I have to provide the context. It was a letter from Pullion to Richard Rose answering a list of questions that Rose had given him. And I knew what those questions would have had to have been from my knowledge of Richard Rose and listening to him talk. And for example, he always said every religion, every spiritual teaching needs to answer three basic questions. Where did you come from? Who are you? And where are you going? Meaning, what was my source? What's the purpose of life? What's my meaning in the world? And what happens to me when I die? Okay, so what happens to me when I die is really the big one, right? So Pullion was running down this list of questions or answers to these questions, and Pullion was generally pretty concise in his answers, and he cut to the chase. And then, and the other context was when I was reading these letters, even though I quit, I was somehow inspired to participate in an online group that Art Tickner, Steve Harnish, I'm trying to think there were three of it. That's a separate story, I won't go there. Anyway, so I was participating in this online group, and we decided to use the Pullion letters as our material. So when I was reading these letters, I made up my mind. I mean, I had the whole stack of letters, but I decided I was not going to read them like a book. I decided I was going to read them in about as much time as they would have come through the post. The old-fashioned way. It's not instant communication. You get a letter, and you actually have to think about it for a few days. No instant message reply. So I held my head that way, and I would read a letter. And the first letter I read really set the tone. I mean, boy, did it set the tone. So anyway, when I got to this letter and was reading these questions, Pullian, these letters were my letters, and he was writing to me, not Richard Rose. I mean, that's how they were coming across for me. So I get to this one letter and goes, okay, regarding the question. Well, I knew immediately what that question was from my knowledge of Richard Rose. He goes, regarding the question, the body dies and is dissipated. The mind, which is likewise which is at all times one with the body, likewise dies and is dissipated. Nothing of you will remain. And my frame of mind at the time is, well, you know, I don't have time to get into my whole, you know, the whole state of mind and everything, but I can say this much. It was late at night. I was reading this letter to get the letter read, and then I was going to, the next day I was going to work on, because it was my turn to be the monitor, and I was going to have to write some commentary on this letter. And so when the words, when I got, you know, I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to hear what Pullian says. Pullian is about to answer the question. And I had an idea of what he was going to say, and it wasn't what he said. I mean, I thought he was going to say something along the lines of Eckhart Tolle or Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta, and it was going to hear about this wonderful thing that this was the answer. And it was, okay, the body dies and is dissipated. Okay, all right. Yeah, I know that. We all know that, right? Nobody in this room thinks that they're their body. Okay, they think I could decapitate you from down and you'd still be you. You know, not for very long. So that perked my ears up. It locked my attention on the answer. I mean, this all happened very quickly, right? Because I'm reading this phrase. But then where he got me was the mind, which is at all times one with the body. Yeah, I mean, how we always assume that you're, you know, like Rose told the lady one time that was talking about some terrible experience she had, and she said, well, it's only my body. And he said, well, how about we send your body to Pittsburgh and keep you here? And she looked at him with this puzzled look. But we think that way. We think that we're independent of our body. We really do. And I did. So, but just in that moment when he said the mind is at all times one with the body, I accepted. I knew it was right. And he says, likewise dies and is dissipated. He had me, I was suspended at that point. You know, I mean, I just couldn't argue with it. So it's like the setup was there. He had suspended my disbelief, or pride, you know, I accepted that. And the punchline, nothing of you will remain, was like the tablecloth going, the cliche of the magician snapping the tablecloth off the table, and every object on the table stays exactly in the same position. That's kind of what it felt like. He didn't say nothing remains. He said nothing of you remains. And I don't know how to explain it, but in that moment, I accepted my own death. I died. I mean, it was jarring. I mean, I was so tired at the end of the day, I couldn't deal with it. And I was already in a pretty depressed state because of a whole bunch of other factors going on. And I remember putting the letter down and just stumbling down the hallway to go to bed and thinking to myself, you know, now this. And, you know, I think the thing that really, now this was the beginning of the unraveling. I mean, I don't know. I think back on it, I think, well, that's the moment when the realization occurred. But yet it wasn't finished. I could point to a later time within a week or 10 days when, no, that was the real point. There was a second more point. So I went to bed. I mean, I felt dissociated from my body. I didn't feel right. I went to bed because I was on this treadmill. I had this treadmill of work, and it's another whole story, but I had to keep pedaling. So I went to bed, and I remember the next morning I got up, and the first thing I did was put my foot on the floor and stop to see if I still felt really weird. And I did. I still felt discombobulated. but I didn't have time to think about it. I had to get up, get ready for bed, get breakfast, go to work. And so this odd situation went on for, I guess, about a week. I don't know. I didn't keep a journal. It's fuzzy on the time. But it was like in between I worked at a computer doing programming and whatnot. So I'd be totally focused and absorbed in my work. And then in any break time, like stopping typing and getting from my chair to go get a printout, in that space of time, I would revert back to this. I would just collapse back into myself and feel the same dissociation. So this went on for, and again, I didn't have time to think about this, which I keep saying it because I think it was really important that I didn't. I think if I had sat down to meditate about this, I think I would have just stopped whatever was. I would have killed it somehow. My wife, I worked at home. I was self-employed, and my wife didn't work, so she was home. So I had no space to be alone. So that was the other thing. I felt like I had to keep a lid on whatever was happening. So one day I got in the car and I went out to run some errand. And, this was really prominent. It was really hanging on the edge of my mind, so to speak. And I don't know how to describe it other than, I got almost angry. I'm driving the car. And by the way, the significance of the car for me, too, is that whatever is going on, when you're in the car, you are at the center of motion. You are the still center, and everything around you is moving. So I think that was kind of dovetailed what was going on. So I remember kind of literally grimacing, saying, "What is this?" I wanted, and I popped through. I say it that way because in that moment, it's like I was. I mean, I would. I don't know, to relate it. I was thinking about this chart earlier because I don't agree that realization is not an experience. There's a real paradox here. I can't explain it, but what he called this line, this is as far as you can go. This is I'd call this individual consciousness here. And I popped, to me, that was an object. That was an object in the attention. And I remember, here I am driving a car. This is in Raleigh on Glenwood Avenue between the airport and Pleasant Valley, whatever. And I remember shaking my head like this, saying, "There is no death. There's nothing to die. There is no death." And so I was in this, I completed my errand and I drove home. And I remember in the drive home how I felt like I was Bob Cergol. The individual consciousness continued on as something I could witness. When I say I witnessed, I wasn't witnessing it. I mean, I was omnipresent. And I remember having the thought too, thinking that, well, so what if I drove home and turned the corner and I saw my house in flames and I knew my family was inside and they were dying? How would that feel? I don't know where that thought came from, but it popped into my mind. And I saw, yeah, boy, this Bob Cergol who was driving the car, he would be really tore up by that. I saw the pain and anguish that would be, but it was still out there with the rest of the experience. So that's why I talk the way I do. I mean, what is the object of your attention? And there is the possibility that Merrill Wolf talks about consciousness without an object. I use the word awareness as distinct from consciousness. Consciousness to me is the word I use for individual, localized awareness or individuality. Awareness is not that. Awareness is what powers it. So anyway, those simple words were, to use the other guy's phrase, the turning word for me. And I can't tell you how many people have read those letters, and it didn't have that effect on them. but something else will have the effect on them at the right time, and you don't know when that time will be for you. It could be on your deathbed. It could be tomorrow.
Bob, can you cast your mind back to the time when you read that letter? How would you have answered the question that you got
Exactly
the answer
the
from
same.
Buddy?
I've answered it that way. I mean, I think I had.
Now you have, but at that point, before reading his
Oh,
response.
before I read the letter, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I thought Rose was going to send the wheelbarrow for me, and he didn't. And I thought, well, I've given up on the search, but you know what? That's not 100% true either. I really thought that, okay, I mean, I believed I wasn't going to find the answer during my lifetime, but Rose said the other opportunity was at the moment of your death. So I thought, well, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to have this dignified, graceful death, and I was way too smart to think that angels were going to carry me to heaven. I mean, that was for children to believe, right? And I was much more wise than that. So I believed that I was going to, become enlightened. And I was still conceiving it as an addition to me. Enlightenment was going to add something to me eternally. And I am eternal, but you can't. The I that I'm using in the I am is not the body sitting in front of you or the personality that's generating these words. So I thought that I'd made the investment. I mean, I literally thought the thing I said to you earlier. I just conceded. I put in my investment. It was accruing interest, and I was going to get it at the other end. I really believe that. So that's why I was open to Poyan's words, and it was such a shocker. I couldn't deny them. It was. I've often thought about the cleverness of the phrasing of that. How premeditated it was, or if it was just kind of off the cuff. But the sequence of it, okay, because no one's going to disagree with you that the body dies and is dissipated. It's going to turn into dust. Everybody accepts that. But what nobody accepts, nobody believes, everybody in this room, no matter how many times you hear it, everybody thinks enlightenment is going to add something to you. You cannot conceive about, in any other way, because all the momentum and the machinery is built in. I mean, you're operating through this identity, which is concocted. So,
did you believe in reincarnation at all at that time?
No, I never, and I didn't really. In all my readings and thinking and stuff, I didn't dwell on that subject. I didn't think about it enough to say no, it can't be, because I can conceive of within the dream, there could be something called reincarnation. But from the perspective that I gained, that's kind of a bad way to put it, but can't talk any other way, because somehow this personality, that's the paradox of it. Who had this? See, I think it was a realization, but the realization is accompanied by an experience in the field. It's like layers of experience. So there's this. I'm kind of digressing. I explained it to myself this way, that it's not within even the power of God to divide himself. So he can shatter into a million pieces, but everything he touches is God. He can be all powerful, but he doesn't have the power to split himself. And so, to go back to my mirror analogy, the creation is, God wanted to see his reflection, and before eye contact occurred, the reflection turned away.
I would like to ask it again, the same question another way. Like we have certain expectation of enlightenment. What was yours before you read the letter?
It was Super Bob.
Superman. Thank you, Superman.
Well, that's the most abbreviated way to say it, isn't it?
Do you think that you would have an individual soul that would survive death? Or did you
No, because if you want to use those kind of words, it's you don't possess a soul. You might be a soul, but then you have to get into what is the definition of a soul. So I could answer your question saying no, I am soul.
I mean, at that time before the question,
Did I believe that I have a soul?
that you would have a soul that would survive and be
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, I didn't conceive it as a soul. Again, I was way too smart and educated. And, I read too many spiritual books to, be so foolish as to think that I had a soul. It's like, no. I mean, I didn't know what a soul was. I mean, what I did know is that, I have this sense of identity, sense of self. And so I thought that would somehow be launched into this super expanded, I don't know, it's hard to conceive. That's why Super Bob is just kind of a way to, I don't know what I thought. I just thought all my problems would be solved. I'd have eternal happiness and I always hear this phrase, people say that, God is within. And I think it's semantics perhaps, but I think it's backwards or upside down or something. It's that, no, I mean, we abide in God. God doesn't abide in us. We all, in other words, again, that's the egocentric position again. We think that we are anterior to God himself. And so we contain him. I mean, I'm falling back on my Catholic language, I suppose here. I don't mind using the word God. Rose hated it. Whenever he uses it, he liked to use the word absolute. But whatever the ultimate reality.
You didn't know that you were looking for the disintegration of self?
No, Rose talked. He talked about reverse vector. He talked about retreating from untruth. He didn't use words like deconstructing the self. He said he talked about defining the self and self-inquiry. I mean, I don't know if he was cagey or just he really avoided getting too far ahead of you and giving you all these hints because he didn't want you to have a lot of preconceptions. He just his whole teaching method was just all about stirring you up. On the one hand, putting out a set of principles. You got to conserve your energy. You got to do meditation. You got to work on a group level. You have to do the threefold path, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. He said correlated with the way, the truth, and the life on the Christian side. So he talked a lot about that sort of thing. And then once in a while, rarely, maybe after a rapport sitting or something, he might, as the trailing comment of a long paragraph, he might say something like, but then you find out that you didn't have any choice in the matter, or you find out that there was nobody there all along, and none of it made any sense. So I didn't notice or remember those comments nearly as much as all the other ones. So no, I never conceived it. I don't think anybody did. I'm quite sure everybody in the group conceived of it as we're adding stuff to ourselves. We're going to, by eliminating some hang-up or trauma or flaw, I guess that's how I conceived it. I would retreat from error meant that I would retreat from some erroneous thinking which caused me pain and resulted in a flaw, and therefore I'd become better. So absent that flaw, I'd become improved, and so I'd be adding something to myself.
when did you become objective about the desire for self-preservation as truly something that was driving you in a way that you could actually see it?
I think it's started after I got married, because my decision to get married was the beginning of my acceptance or recognition of the fact that, Rose isn't going to solve this problem for me after all, and I've been kidding myself. I was like 30. I was 19 years old when I met Rose, and I was 37 years old, 36 or 37 years old before I said, you know what, this isn't working. And so I thought, I had a moment, I lived in my cabin for a year, and so you face yourself in isolation, and I was in a year-long isolation in a way, and stuff just bubbles up, and something that bubbled up one day is, I just had to face, okay, this isn't working. What do I at least want out of my life if I can't have enlightenment? And I decided I wanted to be connected to humanity. I felt so outside of the world, disengaged. I wanted to be engaged with the world and become part of the rest of humanity that I looked down my nose at for the previous 25 years. And I thought, so what does that mean? How do I translate that? Well, okay, I guess that means you do what everybody else does. You get married and you have kids and you work. And I thought that's what I'll do. And then I'll have relationships, connectedness. I came from a large family. It would be 100 people at weddings. So that's what I wanted. That's how I saw my future. But I also really sincerely had the attitude that I would accept it. I would accept whatever came. I mean, I took action. So I thought, well, okay, if I say that this is what I want to do, I have to back that up with some action. And the action was to move out of my cabin, because to declare that that's what I wanted and to live in my cabin would have been a lie, wouldn't it? So I moved to Annapolis. I was never a sociable person. So I moved to Annapolis, and I forced myself to join a bicycle club. I was going to get out and mingle with people, and so I got married. But to get back to your question, I think when my things got unleashed so quickly with my family, when I got married, my wife got pregnant, we moved, bought a new house. I was self-employed. My business was, I could see the end point of it. All this stuff happened within a year's time. And yet it's like this whole other life had a trajectory of its own. And I felt dissociated from it. So it was becoming dreamlike. And my relatives start dying. And I really did get to the point where I stopped expecting a reward, mostly, not 100%, because in the back of my mind, I thought, well, okay, not during my life, but at the point of death, so I'll just go ahead and live this life, and then I'll get my reward at the very end.
So you had ceased wanting to resolve the problem with Bob.
Yeah, I think that, well, maybe, man, I didn't conceive it that way, but I think my attitude, you said, when did I start objectively seeing I don't know that I didn't think about it in those terms. It's just that I think I had the right attitude or openness so that when things happened, I could look at them and not, I didn't spin things as much. I could just kind of look and see what was going on, and I was certainly open to those words from Napoleon. I mean, if I had read that letter a year or prior to a year or any time before that, I don't think it would have had any effect at all, and I wouldn't have even known what's he talking about. I wouldn't have believed it.
I feel that after you read that letter, that was the day you actually gave up. You realized that they
it could be. I mean, I definitely felt like I accepted, in that moment, I accepted death. I accepted death when I accepted those words. but the realization didn't happen until that second point. And
Super Bob died that day.
I was really surprised by it because Rose had created this concept in me of enlightenment, that it was, he always talked about, well, they're going to carry you out on a stretcher and you're going to go through this intense breakdown, like a nervous breakdown. And that's not how that's not how it went for me. But yet, when I look back on all the years preceding that, I could see that there was many years of unraveling that I didn't realize what was going on, and where I had many episodes of painful. They weren't nervous breakdowns, but I did a lot of crying. That was that. One thing that led up or happened within the preceding years, my wife took she was pregnant and she took our other daughter up to Ohio for a visit. I was going to join her a week later, so I was home alone for the first time since I left my cabin, and some things happened. Things were coming to a head somehow, and I had a breakdown or something where I think I had the mountain experience that Rose talked about. I saw things, life as an illusion, and I was totally depressed by it. I was absolutely convinced that there was no answer. And I remember kind of talking out loud. I was crying. I was saying I was angry at Rose. Why would you promote this? Why would you have anybody go in this direction? It was such a terrible thing to see, because I thought I was seeing the final thing. And I called him up. It's the only time I ever did that, and all the decades that I had been around him, and many times had the urge to call him, and I always be too self-conscious about it, like, oh, I'm just making much ado about nothing. But I needed to talk to him. I called up the farm. He was living out here at the time. Cece answered the phone, and I asked for him. And as soon as I heard his voice, I knew he couldn't help me. There was just something in the sound of his voice. He was already in the stages of Alzheimer's, and he just wasn't. But he did. I started to talk to him, and all he said was, "Well, sometimes it helps to write things down." I had a lot of experiences with him over the years. Sometimes I should write them down. I can't think of them all at once sitting down, but occasionally they come to me, and really remarkable things, kind of things that you read about in the literature that people find entertaining, One happened at the Alzheimer's unit. It was a TAT meeting. We were still meeting down at the farmhouse in the wing, and I think maybe Art was doing the meeting or something, but it was on death. And I think my uncle, I'm hazy on the time frames now, but anyway, I got really upset, and my mind got into a certain place. This is before my realization, but I was teetering. I was on there was a period of time lead up to this, where I was kind of on the edge, and I was in a strange state of mind. I felt completely alone, and the world was very dreamlike and unreal. And we all went to visit Rose the next day, and I was feeling this really intensely when I got there. And I'd visited him many times before this, and he was totally non-communicative because of the Alzheimer's. And this time he got up from the room we always met in, and he walked out to the hallway and stood by a window and looked out the window and was just standing there. And I walked up and I stood next to him. I was looking out the window, and I felt the intensity welling up in me of this whatever I was experiencing. And this man who had Alzheimer's and had been in the hospital or the home or whatever for, at that point, probably 8 years, standing next to me, reached over and put his hand on top of my hand and said, "There's nobody here, is there?" And that's exactly how I felt. And he, I told this story to someone else just recently. I remember thinking, well, was it a hallucination? Did he actually say that? No, I mean, people were standing right behind me. I don't think anyone else heard him, but it was not an imagination where I thought I heard him say that. He said it. The air came out of his mouth. It really amazed me how did he generate those words? And I never heard anything but gibberish out of him again until up and never again.
Was that a transmission?
Was that what?
A transmission, like he talks about transmission.
I think there was boy, that's a lot of people don't like that word because it sounds like, okay, I've got a dart gun here and I'm going to pull the trigger and a dart's going to travel across the room from me to you and hit you. But, a better way to think about it is a tuning fork. If a fork's vibrating and fork's over here, it just starts vibrating the same. The difference is that tuning forks have to be like a half inch apart. But when it comes to essence, there's no space and time. So I don't know. You could. I think there was transmission. I think there was a transmission from Rose that happened very, very early in my association with him, and then I spent the next 20 years running away from it because to have received the transmission would have required dying. And it takes people a long time to die. It's you have to go through. Well, I mean, my whole momentum was building my identity at that time. So, my history with him was coming and going. I'd come around him and I'd have to get away from him. I lived in his house for 6 months, and then I moved to Houston for 2 years. And then I came back, and this time I lived across the river in Bel Air. And I lived there for a year, but the close proximity and the interaction, I have to get away from them. And I think it was just one interpretation I could cast backwards looking on it. Was like I went through this long, circuitous route to come around to what he had somehow given me to understand, or in some way.
Why did he keep away from him? You didn't believe him?
It was intense, the confrontation. I mean, he depressed me. He did. I mean, his life seemed hopeless. He generated the doubt sensation in me. I'll tell you that. It's like, well, what's the point? He struck me as a tragic figure, and it's like, I don't want to end up where you did. I don't want to end up like you. Doesn't seem like much fun.
But you were attracted to something also because you kept coming back.
Well, because I could feel him somehow. When I first met him at the first talk at Kent State, I walked into the room and he was sitting in a chair like one of the audience members, and I happened to sit down right behind him, and man, something about this odd old man that's sitting in front of me. What's he doing here? I could just feel electricity around him. And then I was a little bit surprised when he got up and started speaking. But the thing about him is he made you realize that something called enlightenment or a final answer to all the questions of life and death was real, that there really was an answer, and that he had it, and that it was a possibility for you. I mean, up until that time, in my case, I had never read any books about that. the whole concept of spiritual work was new to me. That's why it was so appealing. Well, that could be my career. I mean, I'd been raised Catholic, so I had that teaching, but I didn't know. I'd not read any Zen or Buddhism or Hinduism or anything. So that was the attraction. That he could. I also saw him as someone he could. I felt like I had problems. I mean, I was pretty average, I think, but I felt like I needed help, and I just knew that guy is a guy. He could cure me. I don't think I needed cure. It wasn't like I was neurotic, unless, like Jim Burns would say, well, everybody's neurotic. So I thought that's why I hung around him. And he became like a father to me. So he really gave me a lot of attention. So I had a relation. I felt like to me he was my true godfather. Everybody has godfathers that gets baptized, but what does that mean? Well, he was my true godfather.
So Bob, have you got all your questions answered? Like whatever questions you had before in Night Outline, did you get all of them answered?
Well, I'm not looking for my definition, and I'm not looking for where did I come from, who am I, and where am I going. But I still puzzle about a lot of things. I mean, I still puzzle over a lot of my behavior, my reactions, and I don't really puzzle about it, but I'm no different really. I'm just what changed for me is I don't have this angst. I have lots of worries. I have a lot of obligations. I set a lot of things in motion that I feel compelled to keep going, or I don't feel any reason why I should pull the plug on things. So I have a lot of worries about that, but I don't have the same kind of, it sounds dramatic, but I had this existential angst. It just gnawed at me, which was tied up with my inability to commit to, like, well, what am I going to become in life? What should I do? That all went away. Now all that matters, I gotta make that next mortgage payment. And wonder how the girls are going to go to college and who's going to pay for their wedding.
You weren't feeling unemployed?
Yeah, well, that's part of the mortgage thing. Hopefully no prospective employers will find this video and I'll still have a chance of some gainful employment. Well, I really enjoyed visiting with you.